Hello and welcome to yet another episode of the Travel Dialogue podcast. I call it the Travel Dialogue Quick Take. And in this, what we do is we pick up a breaking news article, we pick up a reader question, we pick up a concept and quickly discuss and get you to the truth. What's really going on? What's happening over here? And today, one of the common questions that has always been flashing in front of my eyes is whether travel is free. Now, if you look at the internet, you will see that it is full of people writing clickbaity headlines about how travel is free for them and they have their business class flights and flashy hotels. What's really going on over here? Well, let me bring the facts to you. To an extent, yes, there is a lot of hyperbole, if I may say that, when it comes to the content online, especially about luxury travel. People always want to do a bit of bravado and bragging when it comes to talking about their latest mileage redemption. And they talk about, oh, how wonderful my flight was and how wonderful my hotel suite was and things like that. But was it really free? Now, there are a few costs that you need to incur before you actually book that quote-unquote free flight or hotel stay. To answer the question, it isn't really free. It isn't really completely free, but I would say it is extremely discounted. Now, given how good you eventually become at this, you will ensure that that discount is higher than others. Now, when I started in this space many years ago, 12 to 13 years ago, I used to book a lot of things like a rookie. But now I know a lot of mistakes that I've made in the past and learned from them. So in essence, what I really want to say here is yes, travel can be very heavily discounted, 50, 60, 70% discounted, and you can have some really luxurious experiences if you do it the right way. However, you will also incur some costs. Now, what are those costs? Number one, credit card annual fees. Now, we have already done an episode on this. So if you want to go back, you can have a look at episodes and you will see that we have done an entire episode on whether you should get a credit card with an annual fee. So the way it works is if you get a credit card that charges an annual fee and gives you a luxury experience, you still have to pay that fee upfront. And then it is up to you to redeem enough benefits in the next year. If you do a really good job, then you're getting great value from the card. But bear in mind, your travel isn't necessarily free. It is subsidized to a massive amount, but you still have to pay that annual fee upfront. When it comes to airline miles and hotels, it's a bit different. You have credit card reward points on one hand, where you can actually book free travel if you book through the portal. Let's say you have a ton of points sitting in your account and you decide that I'm simply going to buy travel from my bank's portal. In that case, booking a hotel stay or booking a flight, it might be pretty straightforward to quote unquote get that free flight. However, when it comes to hotels, it's slightly different. In case of airline miles though, what happens is, let's say you have airline miles that you transferred from a credit card to that mileage program and you book your flight using that airline's miles. What happens is you still have to pay whatever taxes and fees that airline is levying on you. With hotels, though, it's slightly different. Usually what happens, and this is in most cases, when you book a hotel with points, your entire stay is free of cost because you don't have to pay anything out of pocket. That is extra. However, bear in mind that unless you really have elite status or any other benefits through some other program, what it would actually mean is while your stay is free, all the other stuff that is there at the hotel, you still have to pay for that. So unless you already have a package that pays for it, you still have to pay for your breakfast. You still have to pay for your a la carte dinner or anything else that you buy while you're on the hotel premises. So I will give you a few examples and you can get a better idea of what I'm saying. I just don't want to keep rambling and ranting. So let's have a look. Let's share the screen and see what's going on over here, and we will get a much better idea. So let's get started. Now, this is the Singapore Airlines website. We had just done a quick live episode a few days back because Singapore Airlines popular promotion, Singapore's KrisFlyer Escapes, is out. 30% off on select routes. on select destinations and dates, and that is all there in the live video. So if you go back to the playlist, you'll find the live video where I've done a 20-minute video about how to book Singapore KrisFlyer escapes and how to get 30% off on your next Singapore Airlines Award redemption flight. So let's have a look at an example over here. We are taking a flight, let's say, from Singapore to Hong Kong, and we'll just put a date in the future. Let's select August 16th and see what shows up. Now let's have a look at this. There are lots of different flights with this promotion. Look at this. This is fantastic. And now this is discounted mainly because of the Singapore KrisFlyer escapes. And again, as I mentioned before, refer to the live video in the playlist. You can have a look at exactly how this works in great detail. Anyway, to come back to your example again, 11,550 miles. Now you might say, wow, 11,550 miles will get me from Singapore to Hong Kong, 4 hours by flight, free of cost? Almost, because you still have to pay Singapore dollars, $65.20. So that's how it works. And in different parts of the world, depending on the rules and regulation and taxation policies and things like that, the way the segments are structured, that amount may differ. In certain cases, you find that the amount is really low. For example, if you're flying domestically in the United States, that amount is as low as $5.60. Yes, I'm not kidding. It's just $5.60 for domestic flights in the US and flights departing from US most of the times. But depending on where you're flying from and what your destination is, this amount may vary. However, it is not going to be very exorbitant where you are just going to run away from this. Anyway, the point over here is it's not completely free though, but it's heavily discounted. What otherwise would have cost you money is only costing you $65 Singapore dollars and 20 cents. Now let's have a look at an example of a hotel chain. Let's go to Hilton.com. Let's have a look at a destination where I had recently gone, which is Seychelles. Let's say you are flying from Seychelles. Let's say you're flying to Seychelles. For those who don't know, there are already flights from Mumbai to Seychelles, which are now direct instead of having to connect in the Middle East. So that's a much better way of connecting to Seychelles. Here are some of the hotels that show up for Seychelles. And if you haven't stayed at any of the Hilton properties in Seychelles, I would highly recommend the Hilton Seychelles Northholm, and also recommend the Mango House. That's also a very good property. Hilton Seychelles La Brise is a property that we stayed at. That was pretty good. If you have a family, then I think the La Brise is a much more family-friendly property. Otherwise, if you're just going for a honeymoon, then I would highly recommend something like a Waldorf Astoria if you want to really have an ultra-luxury stay, or Mango House or Seychelles Northholm. Now, here you see all these prices. These are in euros, and the moment you click on use points, it will show 100,000 points, 120,000 points, 90,000 points. So let's take 100,000 points and see what happens next. Now you will see the difference over here that unlike the airline example, once you book this particular hotel, your total cost will actually be $0 or €0, depending on the currency, and you'll pay a total of 100,000 points. Now, this is slightly different from the way, as I showed you, airlines work, where you still have to pay those taxes and fees. In case of hotels, you don't have to do that. However, there is still a caveat to that, and that caveat is that certain hotels around the world, depending on the hotel chain and the type of property, will also charge you resort fees. Now, these are really sneaky, and some properties do a really bad job of not advertising them well in advance. They should ideally be doing that. They don't do that. Anyway, my job is to educate and inform you in advance. So in this case, what happens is, you check into the hotel and then you are told about that $30 or $50 a day resort fee. So you should always keep that in mind before you book. Again, the key takeaway here is that no, travel isn't quote unquote free. That means you're not paying €0 or $0 or €0 for your next trip. But if you maximize travel loyalty programs with card rewards, then your travel can be very, very heavily subsidized. Your travel can be heavily discounted whenever you travel next. Also, you can fly really, really far for the same amount of miles. So there are a lot of little quirks that come up if you start studying this in great detail. All right, I hope you enjoyed this episode. My goal was really to bust the myth here. You will see a lot of articles talking about how travel is free. I would say that travel is not free. However, if you're willing to pay attention, if you're willing to do the research, then travel can be very, very heavily discounted. More importantly, it will not only be heavily discounted, you will also have some of your best experiences in terms of luxury and opulence, whether it is flying business class, first class, or staying at that dream hotel. That wraps up one more episode of the Travel Dialogue podcast, and we shall see you very soon in the next episode. If you haven't already, then please subscribe to the podcast on YouTube. Follow us on all social media channels at Travel Dialogue Podcast. You will find us on Facebook, Instagram, as well as X. Again, if you like the content that you see here, please like, comment. It all helps us with the algorithm as we grow. If you have your own questions and would like to submit a question to us, simply comment in the video or reach out to us on social media. And who knows, your question might just be featured on our next episode. So I hope you enjoyed this little session, and I hope you have a great rest of the day. Talk to you soon. Bye.